16 potential jurors were dismissed today for reasons ranging from bias against Somalis and bias for what they already know about the case to health and financial reasons. We've learned that the prosecution is going to challenge the theory that Justine Damon slapped the squad car prior to Officer Mohammed Noor shooting her in July 2017. It's looking now like the jury selection could be finished Friday or maybe even tomorrow if things speed up when they start questioning the jury in groups. Now, a couple things to note. There have been some jurors who've been dismissed because they say that their minds made up on this case already based on what they've already heard about it. But really, most of them who have heard about it say they basically have a basic recollection of what happened. One other thing to note, already attorneys on each side have been after each other, sniping at each other, even accusing each other of misconduct. That's something the judge is keeping an eye on and says that she doesn't want that sort of interaction to happen in front of the jury when the trial begins. At the Hennepin County Government Center, Lou Raguse, KARE 11 News.